Let me see. Were these the questions?
These are the questions. Sandy's not here. Sandy's she'll be in later, but she had an appointment.
Oh, okay.
So
So
I
we
don't
need
know
to take her out.
if they didn't, someone didn't relay that to you, but
She's here for
It's at
9:45. 9:45.
okay.
The delegation, while we're waiting for Jason, the delegation had asked about this building. They approved $50,000 to redo the lighting in this building, which has been done. What happened was we split it up into $25,000 for the lighting and $25,000 for control technology to put a panel in to control the heat and the air conditioning. That still needs work to be done, but of the $25,000 that went into the lighting, we spent $24,125, so we have about $875 left over out of that account. As far as control technologies, we have money left, but there's something else that happened up on the roof regarding the controls, and so I don't have a final figure on that. We have spent already $21,535. So we'll have an update. As far as the savings yet on electricity, it hasn't been in fully connected to make any difference right now. If it was a year after we had it connected, we could tell. We'll look at the month bills. That may not show because of the what I want to say. We could probably compare it with this year back a year ago because of the shorter days, more electricity is being used, so we can't compare it to a month just before. We'll try to come up with something that would show that there is a savings on the new lights that we have. We do have, as a result of the delegation also, they asked if we could come up with what other counties are making per hour for comparable positions. We have that. We will share that with them. We don't have the total as to what it would cost to bring our employees up to what other counties are at the minimum. We're way below the minimum in many cases. And so we haven't. I was just handed this just before I came up, so I haven't had a chance to look at it. But it has been sent out to delegation members. And we'll see what the bottom line is. I said Monday that I believe it'll cost taxpayers a lot of money to bring all our people up to comparable salaries or hourly rates that other counties are. For example, Carroll County the tax rates in 210 for Carroll County was 99 cents per thousand. In 29. In 210 it was $1.03 per thousand. County budgets, in comparing our county budget with all the other counties, Belknap County was up 6.29%. Carroll County was up 5.3%. Cheshire was up 8.7%. Coos was up 6.5%. Grafton was up 6.7%. Hillsborough was up 18%. Merrimack's up 15%. Rockingham's up 15%. Stratford's up 11%. Sullivan is up 6%. So we are still on the bottom as far as any increases in our budget. And it ranges from almost 26 million up to 87 million. Hillsborough is the highest with 87 million. If you looked at population growth for 2010, Belknap County was around 60,000. Carroll was 47,000. Cheshire, 77,000. Coas, 33,000. That is the lowest population county in the state. Grafton was 89,000. Hillsborough County was 400,000. Merrimack, 146,000. Rockingham, 295,000. Stratford, 123, and Sullivan, 43. So Coas County has the lowest. Sullivan County is next, and Carroll County is third from the bottom as far as population. Come right up, Jason.
And the tax rates? The tax rates in the other counties?
Belknap is $1.35. Cheshire is $2.90. Coas, $3.42. Grafton, $1.30. Hillsborough, $1. Merrimack, $2.50. Rockingham, 95 cents. Stratford, $2.34. Sullivan was $2.63. That was 209. We were at 99 cents. Okay. This will be available for anybody to look at. Okay, Jason, you got a...
Board of Commissioners, I wouldn't mind if I could respectfully request just a short recess. We just have to set up a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Yep.
And I can, before we take that recess, I just want to introduce Mr. Kevin Warwick and Jane Claycamp, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Kevin is a consultant from National Institute of Corrections. He's here to talk about the various programs that we want to implement. And Jane is also an NIC consultant. She works as she works in a program out in La Crosse, Wisconsin. They fall under the Department of Health and Human Services out there, and they run basically a justice sanctions program, if I wouldn't say that correctly. These are the people that have been in custody, have transitioned out into the community. They oversee bail supervision, they oversee electronic monitoring, and an array of programs for inmates that are being released or even pending trial.
Okay.
So before we get into any further, I'd like just to set up a PowerPoint program.
Yep.
And
Excuse me, could you just repeat the gentleman's name?
Kevin Warwick.
I've heard that name before, Kevin Warwick.
He did a presentation at one of the New Hampshire Association of Counties conferences.
Okay, I thought I heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll have a 5 or 10 minute recess to get this connected up, and then we'll come back in order.
Commissioner Swanson?
Yes.
Can I get a copy of that county record?
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
How's everybody doing today? My name's Kevin Warwick, and we're here to talk a little bit about some of your reentry and community corrections programs, to have some discussion on some things that you can take a look at. NIC paid for a short visit here for a couple of days for Jane and I to come here, no cost to the county. So I just want to start with that. What we're here to do is really look at programming pieces, not look at the jail overall, but look at programming and some other things. And so what we wanted to do is take a few minutes to talk about a national model called Transition from Jail to Community. Talk a little bit about what goes on in La Crosse County, Wisconsin, which is a jail that's been doing this for a few years now and has been doing kind of transition work for a long time, but this particular project for a couple of years. And then talk about some of the things we found as we went through and took a look at what was going on at the jail and with the programming right now, if that makes sense to people. Does that sound okay? Okay. So my background is I worked for 20 years in a local correctional facility in Massachusetts. I've been a consultant now full-time for the last 12 years or so, and I work with counties. Specifically, I work with counties on reentry and community corrections, and that's pretty much all I do at this point in my career. So it's nice to be able to drive to a place and not have to fly somewhere. This is much better. So when the weather's been good and it's been a good stay. Gee, I don't know if you want to tell people a little about yourself.
Sure, I'm going to stand up since I'm in the corner. I'm Jane Claycamp, and I have worked for about 16 years in La Crosse County as the person working on alternatives to incarceration, so we have a number of things in place. And then prior to that, I worked with some juveniles and with crime victims and different things like that, so it's been interesting, and being part of the Transition from Jail to Community initiative has been one of those growth spurts that we've had in La Crosse County, so I'm very happy that we were chosen and selected, and it's nice to be able to talk about it, so thank you for
Thank you for being here.
That's right. We finally got the name right, Jane, so
yeah,
we did really well with that.
everybody knows it now.
Yeah, I actually did the project many, many years back when you were looking at the jail. I was one of the two-person team that came up, and honestly I don't remember who the other person was. It was so long ago. But you can see the building is up and running, and things are going well for you, so that's really great. And I've done work in a number of other counties in New Hampshire that are trying to do reentry as well. You know, most county jails, as you know, are rural and small, so your jail fits the criteria of actually most jails in the country. Everybody talks about the big jails, but typically most jails are really small. Reentry kind of works with jails, and we've seen jails with 10 to 15 beds, and jails with Rikers Island that has 19,000 beds that do reentry. So reentry can be done in a variety of different ways at a variety of different costs for a target population that's inside a facility. Okay, there we go. One of the things we wanted to talk about is there's been a lot of research on what works with offenders, and targeted treatment with offenders where you're using evidence-based practice that's worked in other places for criminal offenders can be really effective, and long-term, I want to use the word long-term, can impact your recidivism rates by a great deal. You can see with this study appropriate treatment really works. Treatment that's just sort of kind of willy-nilly, just anything out there, doesn't really have much of an impact. You can see it's not particularly great. But evidence-based treatment where you're really looking at things that impact whether a person comes back to jail or not, and when I say that I mean things like substance abuse, mental health services, education, job training kind of things, all those types of things are the things that impact whether an offender comes back to jail or not. So when we talk about that, I wanted to start with the study. It's been done in a lot of places. Now there's been counties that have been doing reentry now for a long time, and they show these numbers. I have to tell you, implement new reentry programming today, it takes time. It doesn't start out and then go to 30%. At least I haven't seen it yet. Maybe that could be the county that does that. But typically, it takes a period of time to build it up over a period of time.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Go
Yeah.
back to that a second.
Yep. Okay.
You have traditional punishments,
Yes.
inappropriate treatment. What do you mean by inappropriate?
Inappropriate treatment. Here's an example for you. That's one I use a lot. Is self-esteem groups for men. The evidence shows that men don't have self-esteem problems when they go to jail. They think everything's okay. I'm in jail. I'm fine. So self-esteem groups, things that don't work with men at all, make them worse than they do make them better. So if you're doing things that aren't evidence-based or targeting something that leads you to jail, you can make people worse with that. Now, do you have any of those programs at the jail here now? No. There's nothing going on that we heard about that's any of those things. In fact, I've been to some places where I said, you know, you need to get rid of these programs. I call them cruise ship programs. You know, line dancing at 9, basketball at 10. You keep people busy, but you're not going to impact whether they come back to jail or not. Traditional punishments are just, if you put somebody in jail and you leave them in jail and there's no programming, there's nothing for them to do all day, whether it's community service or anything else, they actually get worse. Okay, and their chances of coming back to jail increase. Because if you put a lot of people who are criminal offenders together and you don't give them anything to do, they create a program, and the program they create isn't what you want it to be. And so that's why they tend to go to jail at even higher rates than other offenders, if that makes sense.
So inappropriate treatment could be worse than
No treatment at all.
no treatment at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
All right.
Right. The good news is, and we'll talk about this as we go through here today, in this facility there isn't anything that's inappropriate treatment. You know, there's not enough of the appropriate treatment yet, but there isn't any of the inappropriate treatment. So that's good news. Because you never know that until you get here.
By the way, before you go, do we get a written report?
Yes.
Okay.
I should have said that at the beginning. We're going to do a number of things. We're going to offer a WebEx session to talk about recommendations, and we'll have a couple to talk about today, but we'll more specific ones in a couple of weeks. And Jason will coordinate that in terms of times where we can talk about, you know, the recommendations going forward. So you'll get a WebEx session where you can be at a computer wherever you're at and just sign in. You'll get a full report, and you'll get a PowerPoint that's connected to that WebEx. So let's say you can't make the WebEx meeting and you want to see the report, you'll be able to get that as well. So you get a number of different things along the process. But the written report, we're pretty quick at turning these around. The written report will probably be here in about 3 weeks or so. The WebEx session we'll probably want to schedule earlier than that, and you'll get the PowerPoint as well. A couple of things when you look at criminal offenders. Static factors are things not related to risk and that don't change, in that you can't impact them in a population. How many times a person's been in jail in the past, you can't make them come to jail less often. You can't make them not have a drug and alcohol problem. So those are things that just exist in the person. I'm 29 years old, I live in a certain rural community or urban community. Those things you can't change. The things that you can really make an impact on are, providing people solid substance abuse treatment, giving them job skills, getting a GED. Those are the things you can impact that can help you reduce the fact that they come back, that they don't come back to your facility in the future. And it's not only just about not coming back to your facility and the cost, that's important, but also there's less crime in your community over time. So I think those are the kind of things you want to look at is, one, these kind of programs can help you impact your costs, but they can also help you impact crime in the community long term. People, what they do in the future over an extended period of time. If you look at a criminal offender, if you looked at a typical probation sheet where you'd see what they did, oftentimes a person is committing a lot of crimes over their lifespan. Between 17 and 50 years old, you'll see a number of those. If you can find an intervention where they not only don't come back to jail in a year here, but they don't come back into your system at all. They're not going into stores where there's costs from shoplifting. There's not, the police officers going to court with overtime dealing with drug charges. There's really a lot of charges that if you can find a way to reduce costs, you're going to do well. I do want to say, and we talked about this, Jane and I talked about this earlier, one of the things you got to think about is even the greatest programs out there, the programs that have done amazing work, still are going to have people come back to jail. So we don't want to say to you, oh, by the way, if you do this, you'll have 0% recidivism, because we haven't seen that anywhere. But most places are operating between 50 and 70% for recidivism rates. If you can drop that down significantly, particularly for those people who are we call them frequent flyers, who show up in your jail all the time, you're going to save a lot of money for your county. And also just make your whole operations in your community safer. The National Institute of Corrections created a program called Transition from Jail to Community. It was an effort that started in 2007. They'd been doing transition from prison to community for many, many years, about 12 years prior to that. The reality, though, is most people are in jails, they're not in prisons. I think that's a misconception that people have around the country, is that most inmates are serving time in local jails. Millions of people go through local jails on a yearly basis. So we developed this project in 2007. The Urban Institute out of Washington, D.C. worked with the National Institute of Corrections, and they did an advisory council. They had people from all over the country who were involved, prosecutors, public defenders, correctional staff, people who worked there, victim witness people, ex-offenders, and they got together and they worked on this model. And we'll walk through the model a little bit today as we go through it. And we began to look at a model that made sense around the country for people to implement. And we've implemented this in 6 sites. The first 2 sites, the first year, was in Douglas County, Kansas. They have about a 200-bed jail, a little less. And Denver County, Colorado, which has about a 2,000-bed facility in Denver. They were our first 2 sites that we began to work with. Then we had an application process for 4 more sites. La Crosse County, Wisconsin, James County, which was about 174 people in the jail, right, somewhere in that neighborhood?
A few less than that.
A few less than that, and then about 100 more capacity in their jail. Orange County, California, it's a 6,000-bed jail with an escalator in the facility, a really large facility. Kent County, Michigan, about 1,200 beds. Davidson County, Tennessee, that's Nashville. They got about a 2,000-bed facility. And so we've been working with those sites for the last 3 years. We actually have a report that's coming out over the next probably about the next 2 months or so. That's a final report to show the progress of all these different sites. The reality is all 6 sites have done extraordinarily well. They've done some really good work. And the other thing, the product that we have there, and Jason and I have been talking about this a lot, is we developed an implementation toolkit. Because we're working with 6 sites, but there's almost 3,000 jails around the country. And so there's an electronic toolkit that anybody, a county commissioner can go on, anybody in the local system can go on, a prosecutor, and it walks you through how to develop a reentry program, how to look at assessing the right offenders, how to look at the right kind of interventions, how to sustain these models long-term in terms of cost and research, how to prove them out, and how to look at it over an extended period of time, how to do case management kind of things, how to get a collaborative council together to work on it together. And it's all available. It's about a 300-page document, and it's online. And it's at jailtransition.com. So if you go there, you can find that, and probably most anything that's ever been written on reentry at this one particular site. The goals of this program, and I add what I really look at is long-term public safety. Reentry programming isn't going to impact day-to-day public safety right around the corner, but it's going to impact your long-term public safety issues, because if you can keep people out of jail over an extended period of time, it lessens the problems of a local community in terms of crime. Okay? Now, all 6 of our sites have gone down in terms of their jail count. We can't necessarily attribute all that to our project, but we do find that counties that are doing reentry tend to have pretty good numbers in terms of reducing their numbers in their jail. And the rest of these are fairly obvious. Reducing reoffending, of course. If you're not reducing crime, you don't want to do this stuff. Why would you spend the money on it, and if you're not going to save money? Substance abuse, reducing substance abuse. We know that that's a huge factor in most of our people who go to jail. Reducing homelessness, improving health and mental health, employment and family connectedness, getting families to work together more effectively than they have in the past. All those things are kind of some of our goals. There's 3 components of this program, and they're all important. One is, what do you do with them while they're in the jail? So they're in your facility. They could be there for 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, a very short period of time, a very long period of time. What happens with them in the jail? What kind of interventions make sense for people while they're serving time? Then there's transitional programming like electronic monitoring, electronic open confinement, work release, other types of programs that people use in the community. What do you do with people in those areas? And then what happens in the community as a whole? What are you doing as a community for people post-release? Can offenders get into substance abuse treatment? Can they get access to mental health treatment? What's out there? And this model tries to get communities to look at all 3 of those. And that's a really critical piece for it, is to look at all 3 of those components when you do that. These are the major areas of what we see in our model, and Jane's actually going to walk through all those, so I won't cover those at all. But these are the key areas that we see as critical components of reentry in every community. And then we'll want to spend time having some dialogue about this at the end as well. The must-haves we found after doing the research on this for the last several years and operating our own reentry programs, most of us who work on the project have done that, is there's got to be engagement from local leadership. Now, who is that leadership? It's different in every community, but county commissioners, jail administrators, prosecutors, public defenders, local treatment providers, sometimes local college people. Whoever the local leaders are in that community can be involved in this project and really need to be engaged in some level and to say, here's our goals, here's where we're going, and here's what we want to do. A very important part of this is it's a system change approach. A lot of places will do what I call the program of the month. This isn't that. What this is saying, who do we want to look at in our system? What offenders are we trying to target for this? What are our goals and outcomes as a community? How do we want to do this differently? Who do we want involved in the process? And then how do we move it forward as a collective community? And not everybody's going to be involved on the same level, but I think everybody should be informed on the same level to say, here's who we're targeting, here's the funding we're going to spend on it, here's how we're going to research whether it works or it doesn't, and then how to move it forward. Joint ownership by the jail and the community. To have this work, it can't be the superintendent of the Department of Corrections, the local DOC, running this on their own. They have to be involved with programs like the people we met today from Northern Human Services. Probation is a key component. The prosecutor, the public defender. People working together to make the model their own. The commissioners and the communities that I've worked with, it's been a collective model. And all 6 of our sites with transition from jail to community have done that, and done that pretty effectively. It's a triage approach too. You don't necessarily provide everything to every offender. For example, an offender might be in jail for 3 days. Well, you can't put them through your intensive substance abuse program in 3 days. So you want to make sure you're getting the people who are most likely to return to jail and the people who are going to be there long enough to wrap your arms around, and then you put those people into services. And I think a lot of folks really struggle with that. I worked with a jail in Boston, and they were saying, well, we want to provide services for everybody. I said, well, tell me how many staff you have, and tell me how many inmates you have. How many people can you serve? And the bottom line is, you can't do this for everybody cost-wise anyway, And so you want to target the people who are most likely to have the needs, and again, people who are most likely to return. And Jason, you know, if we went down a list of people who have been in your jail 4, 5, 6 times with all the experience you have working there. Not many people get excited about data, okay?
Yeah, that brings to mind, is it worth anything to begin work with someone who has already established a pattern of crime?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's interesting. That's the factor that people didn't look at in the past. And what they found is, if you can really intervene with this high-risk group, you can reduce, these people come back, when I say the averages are 50 to 70%, these people coming back at like an 80, 85% rate most of the time. So if you can drop their numbers by 40%, you're really saving a lot of dollars. Like, somebody who comes to your jail once is never going to come back, very low-level offender, maybe a minor charge. The student in the area who's in for the first time probably not going to come back, and you provide them a lot of services, you're not really saving much, because the odds are they're not coming back anyway. So if you take the people who are more difficult to deal with, they're not always the most fun to be around, but they're the people who you want to invest your money in, because that's the people who cost you so much money. And if you were looking at your account, Jason, the other day, and there are a lot of people who come back multiple times that have been there just this year, and that's the people you want to spend your money on. And I think the reverse notion was the case in the 70s, in the 80s, and what we found was, we were saying that we were really reducing recidivism, but if you took the population you were serving and you took what they would have normally come back at, and then you took them after treatment, the percentage change was very small. But if you take this high-risk group and then put them into treatment, there's often a 20, 30, 40% reduction over a period of time. So that's what you have to look at. And I think we've always thought it was the reverse. And I probably thought the same thing when I started in the field, is, geez, let's just target these people that have already got their act together. The reality is they're going to get it together and be out anyway. The people who keep coming back are the people you got to put your arms around. And how do you know that? I mean, how you know that is you look at data. How many people get excited about data here? Anybody? Oh, good. Got a couple in the room. Data is important, and I never was a guy that got excited about data, but I am now, because you can't really figure out what you need to do. Like, who's in your jail? Who's been here the most often? How often do they come back? If you implement a substance abuse program like you're doing now at the jail, what's the impact with that population? Bringing that back to the county commissioners, bringing that back to the system to say, let's do the best job we can and evaluate how we can get better. Because the reality is, you can always improve your model if you evaluate the data. I'll give you an example. We had done some recidivism studies in our county, and we had found that men were coming back at a very low rate. So our overall recidivism number looked really good. However, when you took the women out of that, and then you looked at them separately, they were coming back at a really, really high rate. So we thought we were doing this really good work, and we were in some ways, but on the other side, we weren't servicing the women right. So what we did is we developed and adjusted the model to make more sense for the women, and then that number came down. So I think looking at your data helps you, whether you're a delegate, a county commissioner, a jail administrator, a public defender, county attorney, whoever you are in the system, you can say, okay, this is working, this isn't, and let's figure out how to get it better. And so we recommend that people continue to look at data. And it sounds like it's impossible to do, but it really isn't. And Jane will talk about that some with her county. Their jail doesn't have what you call an extraordinary jail data system, but they've been able to do it. Again, we've talked about this triage approach. Some people you might just give a resource manual to what's available in the community, and some people you might put through programming for 2 or 3 months, depending on who they are and how long they're there. So this model says you're going to spend your money on the people who are more likely to return. You're going to screen them by screening the right population, assess them for needs, what are their needs as they get out, and then you're going to make it work for you. The most important thing about this is it's adaptable to local definitions, is that Carroll County might do reentry in a very different way than Sullivan County does, or than Grafton County does, because you want to make it work for your community and the size of your community. I mean, in Orange County, California, with 6,000 inmates, they're going to operate their model very differently than they do in La Crosse, because you build it on the strengths of your local community. And they do look different, but they both do all the things that are listed here, which I think is really important.
So I just want to give a little bit of information about La Crosse, not to, again, it's just to give information, to give examples. So in La Crosse we have one facility, and when I started this job there were 3 facilities, so over time we've condensed that to one facility with 274 beds. plus a number of receiving and medical cells. In 2010, the average daily population was 172, but I think this